They called him traitor, the man whose name became a curse on every believer's lips. But what if the story you've always known was never the full story? What if Judas Iscariot, the one who handed Jesus over, was not the betrayer, but the only disciple who truly understood him? For nearly 2,000 years, his name has been buried beneath hatred and shame. Yet beneath the desert sands, a lost gospel whispers another truth, one that could turn faith itself inside out. What if the traitor was actually the chosen one? Would you dare to believe it? If you believe one person's faith can still change a nation, stay till the end. Because what you're about to hear will challenge not just what you think about Judas, it will challenge what you think about faith itself. For centuries, one name has echoed through the halls of history with shame: Judas Iscariot. The man who walked with Jesus, ate with him, prayed beside him, and then, with one kiss, betrayed him. In every painting, sermon, and gospel reading, Judas stands as the image of treachery, the one who sold the Son of God for 30 pieces of silver. But stay with me here, because behind that familiar story is a question the church has tried not to ask. What if behind the betrayal was something far deeper, something the world wasn't ready to hear? Judas wasn't an outsider, he was one of the 12, chosen by Jesus himself. He saw every miracle, the blind seeing, the dead rising, the storms silenced by a single word. He was there when Jesus spoke of the kingdom, when he revealed secrets only few could bear. Yet somehow, in the end, history remembers him not as a disciple, but as the deceiver. For nearly 2,000 years, that's where the story stopped, until a discovery shattered everything we thought we knew. Hidden beneath the sands of Egypt, a fragile set of ancient pages would resurface. It spoke of light and shadow, of knowledge and misunderstanding, and of a conversation between Jesus and Judas that the world had never heard. A text, unlike Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, one that dared to tell a forbidden story. It was called the Gospel of Judas, and in its pages, Judas was not damned, he was enlightened. Not the betrayer, but the one who understood. A disciple chosen not to destroy the mission, but to fulfill it. This is where the story turns from familiar to dangerous. This gospel paints a haunting question that refuses to fade. Was Judas acting on his own, or carrying out the will of the one he loved most? If this is true, everything changes our understanding of betrayal, of loyalty, of destiny. Because if Judas was chosen to deliver Jesus into the hands of men, then his act, the act we've called sin, may have been obedience. And if that's the case, how many other truths have we buried because they made us uncomfortable? The Gospel of Judas forces us to look at faith itself, to ask what we've believed, who told us, and why certain voices were silenced. It challenges the divide between what is sacred and what was hidden, between orthodox truth and forbidden knowledge. And it whispers one dangerous question: did Judas betray Jesus, or did he complete his mission? If you believe we should ask hard questions about what we've been taught about faith, hit subscribe now and tap the bell, because what's coming next will take us deep into the mystery that the church tried to forget. It began not with a preacher or a prophet, but with the dust of Egypt. Somewhere in the Egyptian desert, sealed inside a limestone box and buried beneath the sands for over 1,000 years, lay a collection of fragile, darkened pages, the kind of pages that history tries to erase. When it was first found, no one knew what it was. The parchment was brittle, eaten by time, the words fading into a language few could still read: Coptic, the last breath of the ancient Egyptian tongue. But among those fragments was one document that stood out, a manuscript unlike any other known gospel. It would later be called the Codex Charkos, named after the woman who came to own it. Inside it lay texts long thought lost: the letter of Peter to Philip, the first apocalypse of James, the book of Allegenes, and one shocking piece of writing simply titled The Gospel of Judas. Radiocarbon testing placed it between 220 and 340 AD, a copy of something older, much older. Scholars now believe it may have been translated from an original Greek text, possibly written in the 2nd century, around the same time that the earliest Christian communities were fighting over what was truth and what was heresy. So this isn't just a random rumor. It's a real manuscript, born in the chaos of early Christianity. The story of its discovery reads like a thriller. Sometime in the 1972, grave robbers in the desert stumbled upon a sealed cave. Inside, wrapped in linen, they found the ancient codex. Not knowing its value, they sold it into the black market of antiquities. From there, it passed from one hand to another, traders, collectors, even thieves, each leaving their mark of greed upon its pages. For decades, the manuscript lay locked away in a safety deposit box, forgotten and decaying. Humidity, neglect, and time ate at the papyrus. By the time scholars finally obtained it, half its pages had turned to dust. It was not until 2006 that the world finally heard of it. The National Geographic Society unveiled it to the public, restored, translated, and ready to challenge 2 millennia of faith. For many, it was a revelation. For others, a blasphemy. And this is where the real battle begins, not in the sands of Egypt, but in the minds of believers. The text spoke with a tone no one expected. It wasn't a tale of greed or guilt. It wasn't the Judas of silver coins and suicide. It was a dialogue between Jesus and Judas, intimate, secret, unsettling. Here, Jesus laughs not in mockery, but in sorrow as his other disciples misunderstand him. He turns to Judas and calls him apart. He tells him things he tells no one else. And then he reveals a secret, that Judas, and Judas alone, will exceed all of them. If true, this means the betrayal wasn't rebellion, it was obedience. It means Judas wasn't the traitor of prophecy, he was the instrument of destiny. But before you rush to defend him, remember this. Not everyone believed the manuscript's message or even its authenticity. Some scholars hailed it as one of the most important finds in early Christian history. Others dismissed it as late, fictional, a Gnostic reinterpretation created by a sect that sought to twist the meaning of the gospel for their own mystical agenda. They argued this was never the voice of the real Judas, nor of the real Jesus, but of writers 2 centuries later, reimagining the story to fit their own theology. And yet, the questions remain. Why did it exist? Why was it hidden? And what did its authors know that the Church wanted forgotten? This ancient codex forces us to confront a haunting possibility, that the image of Judas as the betrayer might have been shaped, not by pure truth, but by the politics of faith, by those who won the battle for orthodoxy. For the Church to survive, heresy had to die. And Judas, the man whose name meant praise, became the perfect symbol of treachery. But what if that was the price of unity? What if Judas's story was sacrificed so the Church could define what was right and wrong, holy and evil, saved and condemned? If an ancient text can shake the way we see one man, what else could it change if we dared to face it honestly? If an ancient text challenges the very foundation of what you believe about a key figure in the gospel, will you face it or ignore it? Because truth does not vanish just because we bury it. It waits. In deserts, in ruins, in forgotten codices. And when it finally speaks again, it demands to be heard. If you're truly serious about seeking truth, not just comforting tradition, then subscribe right now. Don't walk away from the hard questions. Because what comes next will not only test what you know, it will test what you believe. In the Gospels, you know Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Judas Iscariot stands forever condemned. A thief, a betrayer, the man who sold his master for a handful of silver. He is the shadow among saints, the serpent among brothers. His story ends in despair. his name cursed by every generation. That's the Judas we've been told about, the man who failed love itself. But now, watch how the Gospel of Judas flips that image on its head. In the Gospel of Judas, everything changes. Here, Judas is not the fool, nor the greedy traitor. He is the only one who understands. He does not act out of malice or greed, but out of obedience to a divine mystery that no other disciple could comprehend. In this ancient text, the scene unfolds differently. Jesus laughs not out of cruelty, but sorrow. He laughs at the blindness of the other disciples, at their worship of what they do not understand. They speak of sacrifices, of temples, of offerings, of blood things of the earth. But Judas stands apart. He listens, he questions, and Jesus calls him to step away from the others. "Come," he says, "that I may teach you the mysteries of the kingdom." It is a chilling moment, because in that invitation, Judas crosses a threshold no other man dares. He becomes the confidant of Christ, the one chosen to bear the most painful revelation of all. Jesus reveals to him a secret one that strikes at the heart of the Christian mystery, that what the others will see as betrayal is in truth a sacrifice. He tells Judas, "You will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." Those words echo like thunder through the centuries. What did he mean, the man that clothes me? In the language of this gospel, the man is the physical body, the earthly vessel. To sacrifice, it means to set the spirit free. In other words, Judas's act of handing Jesus over was not murder, it was liberation. He was the one chosen to release the divine Christ from the prison of flesh. This is where the gospel doesn't just reinterpret Judas, it rewrites the logic of sacrifice itself. It is a concept rooted in Gnostic thought, the belief that the material world is a corruption, a lower creation shaped by ignorant powers, and that salvation lies in escaping it. In this worldview, true faith is not blind obedience, but gnosis, secret knowledge, inner enlightenment. And in this secret gospel, Judas becomes the vessel of that knowledge. He sees what the others cannot. He understands that Jesus' mission is not to rule the earth, but to transcend it. Where Peter, John, and James see a kingdom of Israel, Judas perceives a kingdom of light. Where the others cling to miracles and crowds, Judas listens for the whisper of hidden truth. In the Gospel of Judas, Jesus reveals a universe filled with unseen forces, luminous clouds, radiant angels, realms of pure spirit, and stars that hold the souls of humanity. He speaks of cosmic rulers who trap mankind in flesh and ignorance. He shows Judas the map of creation itself, the heavenly order, the corrupted gods, the realm of perfection beyond this world. It is not the voice of the carpenter's son, it is the voice of eternity speaking through him. And Judas, trembling yet obedient, hears what no other disciple was worthy to hear. He sees the luminous cloud, the eternal realm, untouched by darkness. He learns that Jesus must shed his body, the garment of mortality, to return to that divine light. And he learns that he, Judas, will be the one to make it happen. That is the burden he carries, a destiny cloaked in scandal, yet sealed by divine will. He does not ask for it, he does not want it, but he accepts it, knowing it will make him the most hated man in history. Think of it, every generation has spat on his name, every painting shows him in shadow, every sermon condemns him to eternal fire. But if this gospel is true, then Judas did not damn himself. He fulfilled the hardest mission ever given to a man. The other disciples will be remembered for preaching, for healing, for faith. Judas will be remembered for obeying when obedience looked like betrayal. That is the paradox of faith, that sometimes the will of God demands that we walk through the valley of rejection, misunderstood by everyone, known only by heaven. And here's the uncomfortable part. If this is even partly true, it doesn't just change how we see Judas, it changes how we see obedience, sacrifice, and destiny itself. Would you rather believe the hero or the villain? What if your hero becomes the villain? And your villain, the hero. If this story makes you pause, if it shakes what you thought you knew about loyalty and love, then hit like and let's keep going, because what lies ahead will dig even deeper into the mystery of why Judas's story had to be buried and why, perhaps, it was never meant to stay hidden. The Gospel of Judas is more than a lost story, it is a challenge to everything the early church built its foundations upon. Because if this account holds even a trace of truth, it doesn't just rewrite the story of Judas, it rewrites the very language of salvation. To understand why it caused such unrest, you must step back into the world of the 2nd century, when Christianity was still a battlefield of ideas. There was no New Testament yet. There were dozens of Gospels, each claiming to carry the voice of Jesus, each competing for authority. And in that chaos, a new movement began to rise. The Gnostics. Their vision of faith was unlike anything the apostles had preached in Galilee. They believed the material world, everything of flesh, stone, and blood, was flawed, even evil. They saw it not as God's creation, but as the work of a lesser power, a cosmic being, ignorant of the true light. And to escape this lower realm, one did not need faith in miracles or the cross, but knowledge, hidden knowledge, gnosis. According to them, salvation came not through outward confession, but through inner awakening. Only those who understood the divine mystery could rise beyond the prison of matter. And so, the Gnostic Gospels spoke in symbols of light and darkness, stars and spirits, cosmic realms and divine sparks. In this system, Jesus was not merely a teacher or savior, he was the revealer of truth, the messenger from the world of light sent to awaken the few who could understand. This is where the Gospel of Judas finds its home, not in Sunday school, but in a war of ideas. The Gospel of Judas fits perfectly into that pattern. It paints a world divided between the ignorant and the enlightened, between those who worship blindly and those who truly see. In this vision, the other disciples represent the church of the flesh, bound to earthly sacrifice and ritual. Judas, alone, represents the soul that receives secret understanding, the only one who knows that Jesus must die to fulfill his divine purpose. And that is precisely why the early church rejected it. By the late 2nd century, Christian leaders were already fighting to define what was true faith and what was false teaching. Among them was Irenaeus of Lyons, one of the most influential voices in the shaping of orthodoxy. Around the year 180 AD, Irenaeus wrote against a sect that revered Judas, saying they possessed a fictitious history in which Judas alone knew the truth. He denounced it as heresy, a distortion of Christ's message. To Irenaeus, these Gnostic writings were dangerous. They elevated knowledge over faith, pride over humility, and secret revelations over the cross. The church had to choose. Either allow hundreds of voices to define Christ, or establish one canon, one truth. And so, Gospels like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were preserved. Others like Thomas, Philip, Mary, and Judas were condemned, hidden, or destroyed. The Gospel of Judas became a casualty of that war for truth. It vanished into silence for nearly 2,000 years, its words sealed away, its questions unanswered. But silence doesn't mean absence. It means waiting. The implications of what it teaches remain profound. If Judas acted on Jesus' instruction, what happens to our understanding of betrayal? If he was obeying divine will, what happens to free will itself? And if his sin was obedience, then what becomes of our concept of salvation? Think about it. Christianity teaches that Jesus had to die to save humanity. Yet someone had to make that death possible. If Judas's act was essential to redemption, then was he a villain or the hidden instrument of salvation? The Gospel of Judas invites us to consider a faith that runs on paradox, where obedience can look like rebellion, where light can hide in darkness, where the outcast may carry the truest revelation. Still, not all scholars see this text as historical. Many argue it tells us little about the real Jesus or the real Judas. It reflects not the memories of eyewitnesses, but the spiritual imagination of a later generation, people wrestling with the meaning of Christ long after his death. They say, "This gospel doesn't preserve history. It preserves theological reflection, the struggles of a time when Christianity was not yet one voice, but a choir of contradictions. Yet even that makes it priceless, because through it we glimpse the diversity of early Christian thought, a world where believers were still asking, who was Jesus really? What did he want? This was not a heresy of hatred, but of curiosity of souls trying to understand a mystery too vast for a single explanation. So the real question isn't, is this canon? The real question is, what does this text reveal about how far people were willing to go to understand Christ? It is a reminder that the Christianity we know today was not born in unity, but in conflict. Each gospel, each teaching was a claim to truth, to authority, to the right to define what faith would mean for generations to come. And when the dust settled, only 4 voices survived, the rest silenced, erased, buried. But the Gospel of Judas refuses to stay buried. It whispers of a time when faith was still wild and dangerous, when truth was not yet caged by dogma. It invites you to ask the same question those early believers faced. If the church's accepted version of events was only one among many, will you question it or accept it? Because questioning doesn't destroy faith, it refines it. It is the fire that separates belief from blindness. So if you claim to follow the truth of the Bible but shy away from texts like this, if you prefer comfort over confrontation, then at least subscribe and let's explore together. You owe it to your faith to face the questions history tried to bury. For generations, the name Judas Iscariot has meant one thing: betrayal. It has become more than a name, it is a sentence. When someone deceives a friend, we call them a Judas. When someone turns against love, we see his shadow. Yet beneath that cursed image lies a man who once followed Jesus, who left everything behind, who walked the same roads as Peter and John, and listened to the same voice that calmed the seas. Who was he, really? Judas Iscariot. His name in Hebrew means Judah, praised. He came from a small town in Judea, possibly Kerioth, which made him different from most of the other disciples who were Galileans. He was educated, trusted, even respected. Among the 12, he was appointed treasurer, the one who kept the group's funds. That means the others saw him as reliable, even capable. He wasn't an outsider sneaking into the fold. He was family. He witnessed the miracles firsthand, the blind receiving sight, the dead raised to life, bread multiplied in the wilderness. He heard every teaching about love, forgiveness, humility. He saw compassion and power flow through Jesus like living water. And still, he carried a secret struggle, a quiet tension between faith and expectation. Because Judas is not just an idea. He's a walking conflict just like many of us. The canonical Gospels show us that Judas had his doubts. He grew restless with Jesus' refusal to rise as a conquering Messiah. While others saw the kingdom as spiritual, Judas may have longed for something more tangible, freedom from Roman oppression, justice for Israel. Perhaps he thought forcing a confrontation would awaken Jesus' true power. Or perhaps, like many before him, he simply lost faith. In Matthew, Judas agrees to hand Jesus over for 30 pieces of silver, a sum barely worth the price of a slave. In Luke, Satan enters him and he becomes an instrument of darkness. In John, he is called a thief, one who loved money more than truth. And in the end, when the weight of what he's done crushes him, he throws the coins back into the temple and takes his own life, a tragic symbol of guilt without redemption. That's the story we know. A man who sinned, despaired, and died without hope. But the Gospel of Judas whispers another possibility, one that cuts against centuries of tradition. In this text, Jesus himself chooses Judas for a sacred task. He draws him aside, away from the others, and reveals a secret too heavy for any of them to bear. Jesus tells him, "You will sacrifice the man that clothes me." In that single line, the story turns upside down, because it means that Judas didn't act from greed or evil, but from divine assignment. He wasn't betraying Jesus, he was fulfilling his will. In this vision, Judas becomes not the traitor, but the obedient servant. He carries out the act that will set the divine spirit free from its human vessel. He becomes, in a paradoxical way, the only disciple who completes the mission. The others preach, Judas acts. And in that act, he earns eternal hatred, not because he was wicked, but because his obedience was misunderstood. This idea creates a deep moral and spiritual tension. If Judas did what Jesus asked, then was it sin or sacrifice? If his act was obedience, then what becomes of guilt? If he played the part written for him from the beginning, can he truly be condemned? It's a question that shakes the foundations of Christian thought. Was Judas the worst sinner or the most obedient disciple? And if that question makes you uncomfortable, good. That means you're awake. Think of what that means for forgiveness and destiny. If Judas's role was necessary, then the redemption of the world was built upon the act we call betrayal. And if that's true, then even betrayal can serve divine purpose. Even darkness can carry light. Even the one cast out by men may be remembered by God. Yet history has not been kind to Judas. In churches, he is the warning, the face of hypocrisy, the symbol of damnation. In art, he is painted in shadow, lips pressed to the cheek of Christ, eyes hollow with greed. In sermons, his name is invoked as the example of a soul that traded eternity for silver. But the Gospel of Judas forces us to ask, have we condemned too quickly? Have we repeated the same blindness that Jesus wept over in his other disciples, failing to see the purpose hidden behind pain? Maybe Judas was neither hero nor villain. Maybe he was a man caught between revelation and regret, burdened with a destiny too heavy for human hands. Maybe obedience and betrayal are not as far apart as we think. If the Gospel of Judas holds even a fragment of truth, then Judas's life becomes a mirror reflecting our own struggle between faith and failure, loyalty and fear, light and shadow. It tells us that sometimes the cost of fulfilling divine purpose is misunderstanding, that sometimes the one chosen by heaven must be hated by the world. Would you rather believe in a Judas who failed or a Judas who obeyed? Which version gives you hope and which gives you fear? Because if obedience can look like betrayal, then maybe our own stories are not as simple as we think. Maybe redemption hides in the places we've been too afraid to look. If this raises more questions than answers for you, leave a comment below. Your voice matters in this investigation, because the story of Judas Iscariot is not just about him, it's about every one of us who has ever fallen, doubted, or misunderstood what obedience truly means. To truly understand the Gospel of Judas, you must leave behind the familiar world of Galilee and Jerusalem and step into a cosmos unlike anything preached from a pulpit. Here, heaven and earth are not just opposites, they are enemies. The universe, in this Gospel, is not the pure creation of a loving God, but a battlefield between light and ignorance. It begins with a bold, almost unsettling claim. The material world, everything you can see, touch, and feel, is not divine. It is the work of a lesser God, a being of limited power and knowledge. In this Gospel, that being is called Saklas, the fool. Elsewhere, he is known as Yaldabaoth, the arrogant ruler who believes he is the only God. He creates the world, the stars, and the flesh, but he is blind to the higher realms beyond him. This is the foundation of the Gnostic vision, a universe of layers, of divine realities stacked one above another, like veils hiding the ultimate truth. At the very top is the invisible spirit, the true source of all life and light. Beneath that spirit dwell countless aeons, eternal beings, each radiating a fragment of divine perfection. and below them lies the world we know, the world of dust, decay, and death, built by the lesser powers. In this story, humanity lives in exile, divine sparks trapped in bodies of clay. And Jesus, in this gospel, is the one sent from the realm of light to awaken those sparks and lead them home. This isn't Sunday preaching. This is cosmic rebellion. When he speaks to Judas, he does not talk about kingdoms or laws or miracles. He talks about realms, angels, stars, and souls. He tells Judas that each star in the sky is tied to a soul, and that when the stars complete their course, their spirits must return to the light. He speaks of the heavenly host angels who serve the false gods, rulers who keep mankind blind to the truth. And he reveals to Judas the map of creation, where the true God reigns above, and where the counterfeit gods keep their dominion below. To the other disciples, these teachings are hidden. They see only the surface miracles and parables, bread and wine, body and blood. But to Judas, Jesus gives something far more dangerous knowledge. He reveals the secret path beyond the flesh. He tells him that the human body, the man that clothes me, is only a shell, that the true Christ, the divine Spirit, must be set free. And Judas, though trembling, understands. He realizes that what others will call betrayal is actually the moment of liberation. Yet even this revelation carries a darker side. In the Gospel of Judas, salvation is not for everyone. It is for the holy generation, those born of the light, who can comprehend the mysteries of the kingdom. Jesus tells Judas that the others will never understand. They will worship a false god, offer sacrifices to the wrong powers, and die in ignorance. Only a few will awaken and ascend. Only a few will see beyond the stars to the true God. This teaching divides the faithful into two worlds: the many who believe with their hearts, and the few who know with their spirits. It is a vision that directly contradicts the Christianity most of us know, a faith built on grace, not secrecy, on love for all, not enlightenment for the few. It presents a chilling question. If salvation depends on hidden knowledge, what happens to those who never find it? What of the humble believer who never seeks mystery but lives by faith alone? Are they blind or are they blessed? And what does that say about God himself? Would the Creator of heaven and earth hide truth from the children he made? Or could it be that this text was written not to replace the gospel, but to remind us that truth has depths we rarely explore? For centuries, this cosmic map of the Gospel of Judas has baffled theologians. Some see it as philosophy dressed in myth. Others see it as blasphemy, a rebellion against the God of Scripture. But beneath its strange symbols, the luminous cloud, the angelic rulers, the sacred generations, lies a single pulse of thought: that there is more to faith than what we see, and that those who seek must dare to step beyond the boundary of tradition. So ask yourself honestly, do you believe salvation is meant for all, or only for the few who know the secret? Which one matches your faith? Because if you believe in the full truth of the Bible but ignore writings like this, you're leaving out part of the conversation that shaped it. You're looking at faith through a keyhole and calling it a window. So don't look away. Don't settle for surface faith. Subscribe now, and let's dive deeper into the mysteries the church tried to forget. Because if the truth is light, then even the hidden writings, even the forbidden gospels, might be the faint glimmer of something greater calling us home. When the Gospel of Judas was first unveiled to the world in 2006, it ignited a storm of fascination and fury. Headlines proclaimed, "Judas wasn't the villain." Documentaries promised to reveal the lost truth about the disciple who betrayed Jesus. For a moment, the world paused, wondering if history had misjudged the most hated man in Scripture. But soon after the excitement came the skepticism, and with it, a flood of debate that continues to this day. Many biblical scholars and theologians began to dissect the text, line by line, page by page. They asked the same questions every critical mind must ask. Who wrote this? When was it written? And what does it really tell us about the real Judas, the man who walked beside Jesus 2,000 years ago? The answers were not simple. Some scholars argued that the Gospel of Judas was never meant to be history at all. They said it was a fictional narrative, composed in the late 2nd century, at least 100 years after Judas's death. In their view, it wasn't written by Judas himself, nor by anyone who had ever met Jesus. It was written by a later sect of Christians, likely Gnostics, who wanted to retell the story through their own lens. To them, Judas was not a person to be redeemed, but a symbol, the misunderstood one, the enlightened outcast, the disciple of secret truth. Others, however, took a different approach. They didn't see the text as a fraud or blasphemy, but as a window, a glimpse into the spiritual diversity of the early Christian world. They saw it as proof that the early followers of Jesus did not all believe the same thing. There were groups that saw him as divine spirit rather than suffering flesh, others that believed in multiple layers of heaven and divine emanations, and still others who believed salvation came through insight, not sacrifice. For them, the Gospel of Judas revealed the struggle of faith in its rawest form, a time when Christianity was not yet uniform, when truth was not yet decided. But even those sympathetic voices agreed. The text was incomplete, fragmented, and full of gaps. The Codex Charcos, the manuscript that preserved the Gospel, was severely damaged by time and neglect. Entire sections are missing, great lacunae, holes in the papyrus where lines of meaning vanish forever. There are places where sentences simply break off, leaving modern translators guessing what might have come next. And because of those missing passages, even the best scholars admit, we do not have the full story. We are peering through a broken window into a world we may never fully reconstruct. The translation process itself added layers of controversy. Words in Coptic can carry multiple meanings, and the slightest change of phrase can turn revelation into contradiction. One early translation suggested Judas was exalted, the 13th spirit, chosen by Jesus. Another suggested the tone was ironic that Judas was deceived. Still others believe the text mocks Judas, portraying him not as chosen but as deluded. In other words, even experts disagree on what the Gospel of Judas actually says. So if the scholars can't agree, what are we supposed to do with this? Then came the media frenzy. Major networks and magazines rushed to simplify the discovery into headlines. The Gospel that changes Christianity. Judas, the hero of the cross. In the noise, subtlety was lost. What was once a complex theological text became a tabloid sensation. And while the public devoured the drama, few took time to read what the text really was. A mystical dialogue about light and darkness, spirit and flesh, knowledge and ignorance. For believers, this was a test not of faith, but of understanding. Because texts like this can be misread in two ways. One, to dismiss them entirely as lies, or two, to embrace them blindly as hidden truth. Both extremes are dangerous. Truth, as always, lies in the space between where we ask, where we listen, where we discern. So where does that leave us? It leaves us at a crossroads between tradition and curiosity, between what we've inherited and what we dare to explore. The Gospel of Judas does not ask you to abandon your faith. It asks you to think about why you believe what you believe, to consider how many voices were silenced before one version of truth became the official one, to understand that faith, real faith, is not afraid of difficult questions, because every generation must decide. Will you accept only what tradition hands you? Or will you examine even the disturbing texts and decide for yourself? The easy path is to walk away, to close the book, to say, this doesn't matter. But if you do that, you miss the beauty of the search itself, the chance to see the vastness of belief that once surrounded the name of Jesus. So if you're still listening now, and your heart is stirring with questions, drop a comment below. Tell me what you think. Do you see Judas as deceiver or disciple, villain or vessel of truth? Let's talk in the comments, because this story isn't over yet. And what comes next will reveal how the church decided which voices would be heard and which would be buried in the sands of history. What does all of this mean, not just for history, but for you? For centuries, faith has been handed down like a sealed box, polished, preserved, and protected. But when a text like the Gospel of Judas resurfaces, it cracks that box open and forces us to look at what's inside. It doesn't destroy faith, it tests it. And a faith that can't survive a question was never strong enough to begin with. Every believer faces this same choice. Do you hold on to what you've always been told because it feels safe? Or do you open the door to deeper inquiry, the kind that shakes your certainty but strengthens your conviction? For the church, this gospel is both a warning and a reminder. A warning because distortion can creep in when curiosity replaces conviction. But a reminder too that truth is not fragile. It has survived fire, persecution, and centuries of argument. It can handle a lost manuscript. It can handle doubt. The early church fought to guard its teachings because it knew something essential. Not every revelation is divine, and not every mystery leads to light. Yet at the same time, faith that never questions becomes ritual without relationship. It becomes tradition without truth. For the individual, this text becomes a mirror. It reflects back the uncomfortable parts of belief. The times you've wondered, what if I've misunderstood God? What if there's more? It challenges you to realize that faith isn't the absence of doubt, it's what you choose to do in the face of it. To wrestle with your questions is not rebellion, it's worship through honesty. Judas becomes a symbol of that tension, obedience and betrayal, love and misunderstanding, faith and failure intertwined. He stands as a warning against pride, but also as a shadow of mystery. What if he acted out of love? What if he believed he was fulfilling God's plan and we only ever saw half the story? In him, we see ourselves torn between doing what seems right to us and what may be right to God. The Gospel of Judas reminds us that faith isn't static, it's alive. It grows when tested. It deepens when questioned. And sometimes, what feels like shaking the foundation is really God showing you how strong the foundation actually is. So here's the question you can't dodge. Will you let your faith stay comfortable, untouched, unchallenged, untested? Or will you let it be refined by fire, stretched by mystery, and made stronger through truth? Because faith that refuses to question isn't faith, it's fear disguised as devotion. And if you're still here, listening, it means you're not afraid to dig deeper. But if you're not ready to do the hard work of faith, if you just want to sit back, nod along, and avoid the discomfort of discovery, then I challenge you, hit subscribe and actively engage. Don't just watch, wrestle, ask, seek, question, because your spiritual growth demands more than comfort, it demands courage. And courage begins the moment you stop protecting your faith from the truth and start letting truth strengthen your faith. We have journeyed through lost deserts, hidden manuscripts, and forbidden ideas. We have walked through the dust of history and stepped into a world of cosmic mystery and theological rebellion. Now, after everything, after the discoveries, the revelations, the debates, one question remains. Who was Judas Iscariot? A betrayer? A misunderstood disciple? A pawn of prophecy? Or a partner in redemption? Let's take a final look at what we've uncovered. The Gospel of Judas exists, a genuine ancient text written nearly 2 millennia ago, discovered in Egypt within the Codex Charcos. It's real, physical, studied and translated by scholars across the world. It tells a story unlike any other one, where Judas is not condemned, but chosen, where his act is not treachery, but obedience, where the one cast as villain becomes the one who sees. This gospel emerged from the Gnostic movement, a stream of early Christianity that sought spiritual knowledge above all else. Its pages reveal a cosmos divided between spirit and matter, light and shadow, truth and ignorance. It speaks of a world ruled by lesser gods, of a Jesus who laughs at the blindness of men, and of a disciple who dares to look beyond what the others can bear. It presents us with a Judas who understands that the body must be sacrificed so that the divine can be set free. A Judas who acts, knowing he will be cursed forever for doing the one thing no one else could. That's the heart of the Gospel of Judas. The story of a man willing to be hated by the world in order to fulfill the will of God. But history and the church saw it differently. For nearly 2,000 years, the Judas we knew was the symbol of betrayal, the warning against greed, the face of damnation. And perhaps that version was needed to teach generations about the cost of unfaithfulness, to draw a clear line between good and evil. But if we've learned anything from this journey, it's that truth is never that simple. Scholars remind us this gospel, though ancient, does not give us direct history. It was written a century or more after the time of Jesus, long after the eyewitnesses were gone. It is a theological reflection, not a diary. Its purpose was not to document events, but to reinterpret them, to provoke, to question, to reveal a deeper, mystical understanding of divine will. And yet, even fiction can reveal truth. Because sometimes, the way a story is retold tells us more about humanity than the facts ever could. So we're left at a crossroads. Is Judas the hero or the villain? The betrayer or the obedient one? Was his act a sin or the sacrifice that made salvation possible? The church's tradition calls him fallen. The Gospel of Judas calls him faithful. And between those two voices echoes the struggle of every believer, the war between what we've been told to believe and what our soul dares to ask. But perhaps the question isn't about Judas at all. Perhaps it's about you. What do you do when faith and reason collide? When truth whispers from the edges of heresy? When a buried manuscript calls into question what you thought was unshakable? You could close the book and walk away safe, certain, unchanged. Or you could lean closer, not to replace your faith, but to refine it. Because every challenge to faith is an invitation not to doubt God, but to know Him more deeply. Maybe Judas wasn't the hero. Maybe he wasn't the villain. Maybe he was both the human face of obedience misunderstood. And maybe that's the point. Because within every one of us is a little of Judas, the part that loves deeply but fails terribly, the part that wants to obey but fears the cost. His story becomes our reflection, a reminder that redemption and ruin often walk the same road. If Judas was misunderstood for 2,000 years, what might you be misunderstanding right now? What truths have you ignored because they didn't fit your comfort? What callings have you buried because they made you afraid? What truths have you dismissed because they challenged what you thought you knew? The battle for truth is not fought in deserts or cathedrals, it's fought inside the heart of every believer. It's fought when you decide whether to question, whether to listen, whether to see beyond what tradition hands you. So as we close this story, remember this: Judas's name has become a curse, but his story remains a mirror. One man's choice changed history, for better or worse. One act of obedience or betrayal, depending on how you see it, set redemption in motion. And maybe that's why his story still matters, because it forces us to confront the truth about ourselves, that faith is not blind acceptance, but the courage to seek what others fear to see. So now I ask you, did Judas betray the mission or fulfill it? Was he condemned by God or by men? What do you believe? Leave your answer in the comments, because your voice is part of this story now. And if this journey challenged you, stirred something in you, or made you question what you thought was certain, then don't let it end here. Subscribe now, share this video, and keep walking with us through the hidden pages of history. Because truth, whether ancient or new, deserves to be sought. And if you believe in truth, but don't act on it, press that subscribe button right now, because truth ignored becomes a lie tolerated, and the only thing worse than betrayal is refusing to face the truth that could set you free. Thank you. for staying with me through this journey through deserts and manuscripts, through questions most would rather never ask. If you've made it this far, it means something inside you is hungry for more, not just comfort, but clarity. You're not afraid to wrestle with the mysteries of faith, and if that's you, you're in the right place. This channel isn't for those who want easy answers. It's for those who believe faith deserves depth, who are willing to look where others won't, and to ask what others fear to ask. So before you leave, I want to hear from you. Drop your answer in the comments. After hearing this, do you believe Judas Iscariot was the villain tradition says, or the disciple the Gospel of Judas claims he was the one who understood the divine mission? And more importantly, why? Your opinion matters, because faith was never meant to be silent. It grows stronger in the clash of honest voices, in the courage to speak what others only whisper. And if this story challenged you, if it made you think, question, or see something new, subscribe now and share this video with someone whose faith needs awakening. Next week, we'll go even deeper, exploring how the early church decided which books would shape Christianity and why this one was cast into the shadows. You won't want to miss that. But before you go, remember this. If you walk away now without subscribing, you're choosing comfort over truth. Don't let that be you. Because truth isn't for the passive, it's for the seekers, the ones who dare to dig deeper even when it shakes what they thought was solid. So press subscribe, join this community, and let's keep uncovering what history tried to bury. Your journey toward truth doesn't end here. It begins now.